Ever been told you can't park in front of your own house? Yeah, that's exactly how my morning started. I'd just come home after a long shift, still in my traffic enforcement uniform, badge tucked away, coffee in hand, when this woman from the HOA comes storming up the sidewalk like she's about to hand out divine justice. Pink suit, clipboard, that permanent I'm in charge here face. You know the type. She didn't even say good morning. Just jabbed her pen toward my SUV and said, "You can't park there. HOA rules." I thought she was joking. My driveway, my curb, my house, all paid for, taxes and everything. So I asked, "Ma'am, what exactly is the issue?" She snapped back, "This area is for community-approved vehicles only. Yours looks official." I said, "That's because it is official." But she didn't catch the tone. She started flipping pages on her clipboard like she was about to quote the Constitution of parking rights. Something about how my work vehicle created a negative visual appearance and intimidated residents. Now, I've dealt with angry drivers, city complaints, and road rage before, but never someone policing where I park at my own home. I kept it calm, told her I'd check the HOA bylaws myself, but she wasn't done. She pointed right at my license plate, took pictures, and said, "If this car is here tomorrow, I'm calling the tow company and the cops." I almost laughed. "Ma'am, trust me, you don't want to do that." But she just stormed off, heels clicking like she owned the pavement. Standing there, sipping my now cold coffee, I couldn't help but shake my head. Because if there's one thing I've learned from years of enforcing traffic law, some people love rules. Until they meet the person who actually writes them. And Karen? She was about to learn that lesson the hard way. Next morning, I woke up to a bright orange violation notice taped right to my windshield. Big bold letters. Unauthorized parking. Vehicle subject to towing. Right underneath, in tiny print, it said, "Issued by HOA Parking Enforcement." That's when I knew it wasn't just talk. Karen actually followed through. She must have typed that notice up herself at midnight, sipping her herbal tea and feeling like the queen of community order. I peeled it off and walked over to her house, not to argue, but to talk like adults. She was already outside watering her flowers like nothing happened. "Morning," I said. "I think there's been a mistake." She turned, gave me that tight-lipped smile that said, "Oh, there's no mistake, honey." "Not at all," she said. "We can't have unapproved vehicles cluttering the street." "The HOA board voted on this last year?" I asked. "Really? The board voted on what? People parking in front of their own homes?" She crossed her arms. "Rules are rules. The community voted for them. If you want to live here, you'll have to comply." That line. If you want to live here. The way she said it told me everything. This wasn't about a car. It was about control. About reminding people like me that she ran this neighborhood like her personal kingdom. I kept my cool. "All right," I said. "Then I'll review the HOA policy myself. Maybe we can find a solution," she smirked. "Good luck. The fines start tomorrow." I walked back home, biting my tongue, trying to stay professional. But deep down, I could feel that slow burn of frustration rising. Because I knew, once I checked that HOA handbook, I'd find out just how far she was willing to stretch her rules. That night, I pulled out my copy of the HOA bylaws. Page after page, I read everything about landscaping. Paint colors, mailbox height, but nothing. Not a single line about parking your own registered vehicle on your own street. That's when it clicked. This wasn't enforcement. It was harassment, and she wasn't done yet. The next morning, my SUV was gone, towed, right out of my driveway. I stood there staring at the empty spot in front of my house, that sinking feeling boiling into anger. My city-issued SUV was gone. Not stolen, not repossessed, but towed right out of my own driveway. I called the number listed on the HOA notice. Some towing company picked up, and when I gave them my plate number, the guy actually laughed. "Oh yeah, that's the one from Maple Grove? HOA ordered it to be towed for visual disruption." Visual disruption. That was a new one. I drove my personal car down to the tow yard, still in disbelief. When I got there, the manager pulled up the paperwork and said, "They claimed your vehicle violated HOA parking restrictions. You'll need their authorization to release it." I smiled, but not the kind that hides frustration. "Buddy," I said, You might want to take a closer look at that vehicle's registration. That's a government-issued enforcement SUV. You just towed a city property." His eyes widened. "Wait, you're with the department?" I flipped open my badge, calm and steady. "Chief of Traffic Operations." He blinked a few times, realizing what this meant. "Sir, I didn't know. They said—" I cut him off. "They said whatever they wanted. And you acted on it." He quickly released the car, apologizing the entire time. But I wasn't angry at him. He was just doing a job based on what Karen had told him. No, my issue was with the woman who thought she could outrule the law itself. When I pulled back into my driveway, Karen was there, clipboard in hand, like she'd been waiting for her victory lap. She crossed her arms, squinting at me. "You went and got it back already?" "Yep," I said, stepping out of the car. "Funny thing, turns out you had it towed illegally. Government vehicles are exempt from HOA jurisdiction." She gave me that smug half-smile again. "Not in my neighborhood." That's when I realized this wasn't ignorance. It was ego. She didn't care about laws or fairness. She just couldn't stand that someone wouldn't bow to her imaginary authority. I took a deep breath, reminded myself to stay calm. "You've made your point," I said. "Now let's make sure you understand mine." She raised her eyebrows. "And what's that?" I smiled. "Next time you have an issue with a vehicle, make sure you're not violating state code while enforcing HOA rules, because now it's a city matter." For the first time, she didn't have a snappy comeback. She just stood there, her face tightening like she'd swallowed a lemon. As I walked inside, I turned and said, "Oh, and Karen, if you're going to call the cops next time, make sure you know who you're calling." She didn't answer, just glared. That night, I could see her from my window, pacing around her yard, phone in hand, probably calling the HOA president or whoever would listen. I leaned back, sipping my coffee, shaking my head. Because honestly, she had no idea what line she'd just crossed, and who she'd crossed it with. By the way, if you've ever had to deal with a power-hungry HOA like this, go ahead and hit subscribe, because the best part of this story is still to come. And trust me, when Karen tried to push her luck again, she parked herself right into the biggest mistake of her life. Next morning, I was halfway through my coffee when I heard that deep beep, beep, beep sound outside, the unmistakable noise of a tow truck backing up. I looked out the window, and sure enough, there it was, a big old yellow wrecker pulling right up to my driveway. The driver was already out checking my SUV's plates. Clipboard Karen stood nearby with her arms folded, a grin so wide she could have swallowed the sun. "You've got to be kidding me." I stepped outside, calm as ever, coffee still in hand. "Morning," I said. "You boys lost or something?" The tow guy didn't even look up. "Nah, HOA said this vehicle's not allowed here." "I'm just doing what I was paid for," Karen chimed in. "Finally, maybe next time you'll learn that rules apply to everyone." I took a slow sip, keeping my cool. "Buddy," I said to the tow driver, "before you hook that up, take a real good look at the decal on the door." He squinted, then leaned closer. It read, "City of Maple Ridge, Traffic Enforcement Division." "Now," I said, pulling my badge from my belt and flipping it open. "You sure you want to tow a government-issued vehicle?" The poor guy froze mid-step. His face went pale like he'd just seen a ghost. "Wait, you're law enforcement?" "Chief of Traffic Operations," I said. "So yeah, this is city property. You hook that up, you're not towing. You're committing a felony." He stepped back immediately. "Oh, no. I ain't getting involved in that." "Lady, you didn't say this was a city vehicle." Karen's grin melted faster than ice in July. "That's irrelevant," she barked. "It's still an eyesore. You can't park that thing here." The tow driver threw his hands up. "Ma'am, I ain't touching that." "You can take it up with City Hall." He jumped back in his truck and was gone in under 30 seconds. Karen turned bright red, and not just from the sun. "You think you can intimidate people with your little badge?" She snapped. I chuckled. "Karen, I don't need to intimidate anyone. I just follow the law. Something you might want to try sometime." Her jaw clenched so tight I thought she might crack a tooth. She stormed off, muttering something about power trips and special treatment. I went back inside, sat down at my kitchen table, and couldn't help but laugh. Because it wasn't about the car anymore. This woman was obsessed. She wanted a win so bad she'd crossed into dangerous territory, and if she thought the show was over, she had another thing coming. Oh, and if you've ever had someone like that in your neighborhood, the kind who acts like the sidewalk belongs to them, hit subscribe right now. Because the next part, let's just say things went from HOA drama to full-on meltdown. And trust me, Karen was about to pick the wrong parking battle. That afternoon, I figured things had cooled off. The tow truck stunt blew up in her face, and any reasonable person would have let it go. But not Karen. Nah. She was the kind who'd rather dig a hole than admit she tripped. A couple days later, I walked into my office at City Hall. Coffee in hand, tie loosened, trying to get through the usual morning emails. Then my assistant knocked on the door holding a bright blue folder with a sticky note on top. "Sir, we got a complaint from the Maple Grove HOA," she said, trying not to smirk. "Looks, interesting." I took the folder, flipped it open, and almost laughed out loud. Right there at the top, formal complaint, officer misconduct, abuse of authority, filed by none other than Karen L. Whitfield, HOA board president. She actually did it. She filed a report against me. With me. Now, as department head, every internal complaint related to municipal vehicle operations landed directly on my desk. And this one, oh, it was gold. She'd written a full-page rant about how I intimidated her with my position of authority, refused to follow community rules, and used a government vehicle to threaten residents. I swear, I could practically hear her typing every word in outrage. She even attached photos of my SUV parked neatly in front of my own house, as if that was evidence of a crime. I leaned back, took a sip of my coffee, and just stared at the ceiling for a moment, trying to process how ridiculous this had gotten. My deputy walked in and saw the folder open on my desk. "Oh no," he said, chuckling. "Is that the same HOA lady who called last month about trash cans being left out too long?" "Yep," I said. "She's really on a roll this week. So, what are you going to do?" I smiled. Exactly what I'm supposed to. Treat it like any other complaint, by the book. Because here's the thing. Power isn't about how loud you can yell or how many rules you can wave around. It's about restraint, about knowing when to act and when to let someone bury themselves. I opened a new report and wrote my formal response. Calm, factual, no emotion. I documented every incident, the violation notice, the illegal tow, the confrontation, everything. Then I attached the relevant city code citations showing that government vehicles are exempt from HOA enforcement. No sass, no ego, just straight professionalism. Later that day, I called her to confirm receipt of her complaint, just like protocol required. She picked up on the second ring. "City Traffic Office, this is Chief Daniels speaking," I said, keeping it formal. The silence on the other end was thick enough to chew. Then she spoke, her voice a mix of fake politeness and disbelief. "Oh, it's you." "Yes, ma'am," I said. "Just wanted to inform you that your complaint has been reviewed and filed. By me, actually, since I'm the department head." "You're the—" She stopped mid-sentence. "You mean you're the one who reviews these complaints?" "That's correct," I said calmly. "And I've gone through your report. I also cross-checked it against city code and the HOA bylaws. There appears to be some misunderstanding." She went quiet again. I could practically feel the steam coming through the phone. "Misunderstanding?" she said finally. "You abused your authority. You threatened me." "No, ma'am," I said gently. "I corrected you." "There's a difference, and the law supports it. I understand you might not have realized that your HOA rules don't override municipal regulations." Her tone sharpened. "So you're just going to ignore a citizen complaint?" "Not at all," I said. "I documented everything. The report will stay on record, with my professional findings attached." "Transparency's important, right?" There was a long pause. Then she let out this frustrated little laugh, the kind people make when they realize they've backed themselves into a corner but don't want to admit it. "You think you're so clever, don't you?" she hissed. "Not clever," I replied. "Just informed." She hung up without another word. I sat back in my chair and let out a slow breath. I wasn't angry. Honestly, I was just tired. Tired of the pettiness, the control games, the constant need to feel powerful over people minding their own business. But part of me knew this wasn't the end. People like Karen don't stop when they lose. They regroup. They plan their next move. And I could feel it. She was about to take this neighborhood war to a whole new level. Before I wrapped up my day, I logged the complaint into the city archive system with one final note. Matter reviewed by department head. No violation found. Complainant advised. And that was that, at least officially. But I had a feeling the real fireworks were still coming. If you've ever had a neighbor who just wouldn't quit, you know exactly how this feels. Hit subscribe if you're rooting for some well-deserved karma, because next, Karen's plan backfires in a way that even I didn't see coming. She wanted to make an example out of me. But she ended up schooling herself in front of the entire neighborhood. After that complaint fiasco, I could have easily let it go. Paper filed, case closed, lesson taught. But something about the whole situation didn't sit right with me. You ever get that gut feeling that says, this ain't over yet? Yeah, that's exactly where my head was. Karen wasn't just pushy. She was the type who weaponized her clipboard. And if she was bold enough to try and have a city vehicle towed, there was no telling how deep her little HOA rulebook empire went. So, I decided to do what I do best, observe quietly and dig where things didn't add up. Not out of spite, but because something told me she wasn't exactly following her own rules. And buddy, was I right. That weekend, I did a slow drive through the neighborhood, purely as a resident on my way home, of course. I noticed a few things right off the bat. On Karen's street corner, there was a bright red curb marked fire lane, no parking any time. But parked right there, bold as brass, was a shiny silver Lexus with a guest of HOA president tag hanging on the mirror. Now, I've seen a lot of nerve in my career, but that right there took the cake. You don't park in a fire lane. Not during an emergency, not during brunch, not ever. Next day I drove by again. Same Lexus, same spot. This time a couple SUVs too. Turns out, Karen had been holding her little HOA planning meetings and letting her buddies park anywhere they wanted. Fire lane, hydrant zone, even blocking part of the sidewalk. So I did what any good citizen and officer would do. I took photos, date stamped, time stamped, the whole 9 yards. Every violation neatly documented. A few days later, I swung by the park where the HOA hosted their summer event. You know, the kind with folding tables, banners, and Karen at the front acting like the mayor of Maple Grove. And sure enough, I spotted another gem. 3 cars lined up right in front of a fire hydrant, one of them with her plate number. Now, this wasn't just hypocrisy. It was dangerous. Fire zones exist for a reason, and here she was using them like VIP parking spots. I didn't confront her, didn't say a word. I wasn't out for drama. I was out for facts. So, I quietly opened a new internal file. HOA Traffic Pattern Review, Maple Grove. I logged every picture, every date, every ordinance number, all by the book. A week later, I ran into one of the HOA board members at the grocery store. Nice older guy named Frank, who always seemed half exhausted by Karen's antics. I casually mentioned the parking situation during their events. His eyebrows shot up. "Wait," he said. "Karen's been using the fire lane again? We told her last year that was illegal. She said the city gave her permission." I smiled. "Oh, really? The city meaning me?" He chuckled, shaking his head. "Man, that woman's gonna get herself in trouble one of these days." "Oh, I think she already did," I said, half under my breath. Back at the office, I compiled everything neatly into a report. Each image, every ordinance violation clearly outlined, including the section numbers from the city's traffic code. I wasn't gunning for her personally, but if she wanted to play the rules are rules game, then she was about to learn they go both ways. I didn't send the report right away, though. Timing matters. If I dropped it now, it'd look personal. And I wanted this to be bulletproof. So I sat on it, made sure everything was clean, factual, and official. And while I waited, I started hearing chatter around the neighborhood. Folks whispering about how Karen's been acting out, how she'd been caught bending her own HOA guidelines to suit herself. Even some of her own board members were starting to question her leadership. Guess karma doesn't always need an invitation. Sometimes it just shows up early. By the end of that week, I had everything ready to go. a complete file that painted a clear picture. Karen wasn't enforcing order. She was breaking it. And she wasn't just embarrassing herself. She was putting the entire HOA at risk of a city fine. I sat there looking at the folder on my desk, debating when to pull the trigger. Not out of revenge, but out of principle. Because at the end of the day, my badge wasn't just about parking tickets. It was about fairness. And if Karen wanted to teach me a lesson about following the rules, then it was time she learned that rules don't bend for the people who write them. Hey, if you've ever seen someone in power get caught in their own trap, you know how satisfying that moment is. So do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button right now, because what happens next? Oh, it's pure poetic justice. Let's just say Karen's HOA kingdom was about to crumble faster than her pink suit could wrinkle in the summer heat. The next HOA meeting was scheduled for a Thursday evening, one of those community get-togethers where everyone drags out their folding chairs, snacks and fake smiles while pretending they're not silently judging each other's lawns. I'd never been to one before, mostly because I prefer my sanity, but this time I had a reason. Karen had plastered the neighborhood bulletin with flyers about this important HOA discussion. I knew she wanted a crowd. She thought this was her victory lap. She probably imagined herself standing at the podium, wagging her finger, painting me as the reckless officer who thought he was above the rules. I showed up 5 minutes early, calm as ever, wearing plain clothes, no badge, no uniform. Just me, a binder under my arm, and a USB drive in my pocket. The room was already buzzing when I walked in. Karen stood at the front of the room, pink suit freshly pressed, clipboard clutched like a shield. She flashed that tight smile that said, "Oh, you actually showed up." "Well," she said, her voice carrying that fake sweetness only she could pull off. "Nice of you to join us, even though this meeting's about HOA matters." "Not city ones," I smiled back. "That's fine. I'm both a homeowner and a citizen, right?" The room chuckled a bit, small but enough to make her eye twitch. She cleared her throat and started her usual speech about maintaining community standards and holding residents accountable. Then she transitioned, as expected, into her story about me. "For those unaware," she said, pacing dramatically, "one of our residents has been repeatedly violating our parking rules with his large city vehicle. Despite multiple warnings, he has refused to comply and has instead used his position to intimidate and embarrass this community's leadership." I stayed silent. I let her dig the hole deeper. She went on about fairness, consistency, and how no one is above the rules. Her voice carried that tone of righteousness that made people nod without even thinking. But the best part? Right behind her on the whiteboard, someone had set up a projector. And when she finished her little performance, I raised my hand. "Madam President," I said evenly, "would you mind if I shared something with the community before we continue?" She looked hesitant. "This isn't a city hearing, sir. I understand," I interrupted politely. "But it directly concerns the HOA's recent enforcement actions and potential legal exposure." That last phrase, legal exposure, made every board member in the room sit up straight. They exchanged glances. The treasurer, a quiet older gentleman with half-moon glasses, nodded. "Let him speak," he said. Karen frowned but stepped aside. "Fine, you've got 5 minutes." I plugged in the USB drive, and the screen lit up with the first image, a bright red curb with a silver Lexus parked right across it. The caption below read, "Violation of Municipal Fire Lane Ordinance 8112. A murmur spread through the room. Someone whispered, "Isn't that Karen's car?" I clicked to the next photo. 3 cars lined up at the park, blocking a fire hydrant during the HOA summer event. Next slide, a screenshot of city code with the relevant fines listed beside it. Then another, showing her guest of HOA president tags printed on her office printer. Karen's face went from pink to crimson. "This is harassment," she shouted. "You can't show those photos without permission." "Actually," I said, keeping my tone steady, "these were taken in public right-of-way zones, and they were part of a municipal observation. I'm well within my rights." I turned to the room. "Folks, I respect homeowners associations. They can do good things when they're fair and transparent. But when an HOA starts making up rules, threatening residents, and overriding city law, that's when it crosses the line. The projector flicked to a slide of the fake parking citation she'd taped to my windshield. "This document," I said, "was never authorized by the city. The seal used here is not legitimate. That's a violation of state impersonation laws. The towing order, filed under false pretense. Those actions could have resulted in real criminal charges, not against residents, but against your HOA leadership." The room went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Even the board members who usually nodded along with Karen looked horrified. I continued, "Every resident here has the right to peace, safety, and fairness. HOA bylaws can't override city ordinances or state traffic codes. Fire lanes and hydrants are non-negotiable. No one, not even an HOA president, gets special privileges." An older lady in the back raised her hand. "So all those fines she sent out for parking?" "Invalid," I said. "Every one of them. The HOA has no jurisdiction over public right-of-way or municipal property. You've all been paying into a system that, frankly, had no legal standing." You could feel the energy shift in the room. Frustration, betrayal, a little bit of awe. A few folks turned to Karen, whispering things like, "You told us the city approved it, and we trusted you." Karen tried to regain control, her voice cracking as she snapped, "This man is twisting everything. He's just bitter because he got called out." I shook my head. "No bitterness here, Karen, just facts. You called the city. You filed a formal complaint. You set all of this in motion. I simply followed the law. Something you, as HOA president, agreed to uphold." The treasurer spoke up again, his tone quiet but firm. "Karen, is all this true?" She didn't answer. She just stared at the floor, clutching her clipboard like it was a life raft in rough water. Then one of the younger board members stood. "I move to vote on new leadership," he said. You could almost feel the air being sucked out of the room. Karen's head snapped up. "What? You can't just—" "Oh, yes, we can," the treasurer interrupted, adjusting his glasses. "Per the bylaws, any board member may motion for removal if there's evidence of misconduct. And I think we've all seen enough tonight." Hands started going up, one after another, every single board member. Even her longtime ally, the vice president, raised her hand hesitantly. The treasurer counted. "Unanimous." Karen looked around, stunned, her mouth opening and closing like she couldn't find the words. For once, she was speechless. I closed the binder and gave a small nod. "Thank you, everyone, for your time. I'll be filing this report officially with the city tomorrow to ensure your HOA remains compliant moving forward." As I packed up, I caught sight of Karen slipping out the side door, head down, still clutching that clipboard. No shouting this time. No finger-pointing. Just quiet defeat. As I walked to my car, one of the neighbors stopped me. A guy I'd barely spoken to before. "Hey, Chief," he said, smiling. "About time somebody stood up to her." I chuckled. "Guess sometimes you just gotta let the facts do the talking." He grinned. "You should come to the next barbecue. First beer's on us," I laughed, finally feeling that tension fade. "Might just take you up on that." But as I drove home, watching the sun dip over the neighborhood, I couldn't help but think how close this place came to turning into a mini dictatorship. One person, one clipboard, one ego. That's all it took to stir up chaos. So if you've ever dealt with a power-tripping neighbor or a bossy HOA, you know the feeling. Smash that subscribe button, because karma just clocked in for overtime, and we're not done yet. Karen thought she ran the neighborhood. Turns out the law still runs the show. And next, everyone in Maple Grove was about to see what real accountability looked like. A few months passed, and honestly, the whole neighborhood felt lighter, like someone had finally opened the windows and let all the stale air out. The HOA meetings actually turned productive for once. No more finger-pointing, no more rule reminders tucked under windshields, and definitely no more homemade citations with fake seals. Instead, folks actually talked about things that mattered: street lighting, landscaping, kids' safety near the bus stop. Real community stuff. When they started rewriting the parking policy, the new board asked for my help, not as the guy who took Karen down, but as someone who understood both sides of the law. I made sure every rule we drafted matched actual city code. No gray areas, no loopholes, just clear, fair guidelines that protected everyone. It was weird at first, seeing how the same neighbors who used to avoid eye contact now waved when I pulled into the driveway. Even the older couples, the ones who had been terrified of Karen's clipboard, started hosting block parties again. The kind with grills, folding chairs, and too much potato salad. And there I was, same truck, same parking spot, right out front. No letters, no threats, no drama, just my city vehicle sitting exactly where it belonged. Every time I'd step out of my truck and glance toward the pink house, yeah, the one Karen used to rule from, I couldn't help but smirk a little. Her for sale sign had come down months ago. She was gone. Moved out quietly, no goodbye emails, no farewell meeting. Just silence. Word was she'd tried to join another HOA a few towns over, but after the incident made rounds on local Facebook groups, that didn't exactly pan out. Turns out reputations travel fast when your ego drives the car. One Saturday morning, I was washing my truck when one of my neighbors, Tim, walked by with his dog. "Man," he said, laughing, "still parking that thing out front, huh?" "Every day," I said, grinning. "It's my driveway, after all." He gave me a thumbs up. "Glad someone finally reminded her this isn't a dictatorship." I just shrugged. Funny thing, people like Karen forget the rules were made to protect, not control. I paused, looking at the sun reflecting off my truck's hood. Turns out I just had to park the truth right in her driveway. Tim cracked up, shaking his head. That's one way to say it. As he walked off, I leaned against my truck and just watched the neighborhood. Kids riding bikes, sprinklers going off, a couple folks chatting by the mailbox. Peace. That's all anyone ever wanted. And honestly, that's the best part about justice. It doesn't always show up with sirens or citations. Sometimes it just looks like a quiet street, no drama, no noise, just respect. So yeah, I still park in front of my house. Every single day. Not because I'm trying to prove a point anymore, but because I can. Because fairness earned its parking spot here. If you've ever had to deal with an HOA power trip, you know exactly what that feels like. And if you believe some of these HOAs need to stop pretending they're above the law and start actually learning it, hit subscribe. Because around here, we don't just park cars, we park the truth.